Good day, subscribers, and welcome back to The Contrarian. Today I'll be talking about my experience on the carnivore diet over the last 7 months, and also why the carnivore diet really has the potential to transform people's lives, and ultimately what it means to be healthy, what really human society is capable of. It really has the potential to transform modern human society, in my opinion, should it reach a mass adoption type of level. Now, that is the key question with the carnivore diet, of course, because it is probably one of the most extreme diets, maybe one of the most difficult ones to get started on. I will argue that it's probably pretty easy to maintain once you've been on it for a few months, but it is definitely difficult to continue. And so it is really a question of how many people could realistically get on it and stick with it. So kind of two parts to this video. First, my experience on the carnivore diet, why I decided to start doing the carnivore diet, the whole thinking behind carnivore. Like, seems kind of an insane concept to begin with, but talk a little bit about that. And lastly, talk about the huge economic implications that the carnivore diet could have. Hugely positive benefits for health, of course, but some real economic ramifications too, because let's face it, a lot of our economy depends on people being sick and the treatment of sickness, or almost the maintenance of levels of sickness, not really making it better. So first off, why did I decide to do the carnivore diet? There had just been a series of little annoying things that had stuck with me health-wise the last 10 years or so. Some things like that. I'd never really gotten over acne. Moving out of my teenage years, early 20s, I kind of expected acne would eventually go away. It never did for me. And so that was a big issue that has really been improved dramatically on the carnivore diet. I would say just general aches and pains, muscle soreness has also dramatically improved on the carnivore diet. Brain fog and just clarity of thinking has really improved as well. For example, I rarely need to edit these videos, whereas before, I'd have to think a lot more about what am I going to talk about next? What is the real purpose of this video? So just overall clarity of thinking is so much better. That was probably another reason for starting it, was almost just giving it a try. It has been kind of a major YouTube trending type of video out there. There's probably not a ton of people actually sticking with it longer term, but it's just it's a trending term on the internet right now. So that was a reason for starting it as well. Now, prior to starting this diet, I am allergic to gluten and dairy, so I had already been on a slightly restrictive diet as a result of that, so I wasn't necessarily new to limiting foods or anything like that. I also wanted to see, hey, can carnivore diet even improve, the level of fitness that I currently am at? Can it improve athleticism? I am a long distance runner, actually, so part of it has been a little bit of experimentation with, can I actually improve my running even in my mid 20s, when typically athletes are starting to face more injury potential, more muscle soreness after long runs and workouts and things like that. I did actually do a 20-mile trail race just about a month after starting the carnivore diet last summer, and overall the fueling, or I would say the lack of fueling that I needed on that race, was pretty remarkable. Everybody else, obviously, in the distance runner world, carbs are everything. You have to eat and load up on carbs, and so eating 0 carbs and all animal-based meat, fat, and things like that is seen as crazy in the distance running world. But I really didn't fuel at all going into this 20-mile trail race, which it took 5 hours to complete. It's a lot of elevation gain and loss on this race, but I did not fuel at all going into it. And I probably shouldn't have fueled at all during it, looking back. But overall, I never hit the wall, never had issues with stuff like that. So obviously my body had adapted pretty quickly to the carnivore diet. Overall, it's improved athletic performance, stuff like that. So overall, I have nothing but positive to say about the carnivore diet. It is difficult to start. It's difficult when you're craving carbs, craving these previous, sweet foods that you used to eat that are loaded with sugar, loaded with carbs. Of course, that's what most people tend to crave. And so I really found it helpful to, incorporate as much of my calorie intake from just meat, eggs, and seafood primarily. So, what does the carnivore diet include? It includes meat, eggs, seafood primarily, and in the strictest carnivore sense, that is all you can eat. Is just anything that comes from an animal. Dairy would be included in that, but of course I'm allergic to dairy. Whole milk has not worked for me either, so I can't include that, unfortunately. But some people could include something like dairy. What the carnivore diet does not include is obviously carbohydrates, so all grains, all added sugars, all vegetables, maybe most controversially vegetables, and then fruit as well. Carnivores would also throw out fruit. So, in the strictest sense, the only thing a carnivore could eat would be meat, eggs, and dairy, basically anything derived from an animal. They wouldn't touch anything derived from plants. I was a bit of an exception. I did eat some fruit. Now I say some in that it was probably 10% of my total calorie intake coming from fruit, so it wasn't very much. But I did, enjoy fruit now and then. I do enjoy an apple now and then with fruit. I really do need to moderate myself with that though, because sometimes I do find myself, if I don't eat enough meat and animal fat type of containing food first, if I don't satiate a lot of my hunger with fat, I will start to want to binge on fruit remarkably, which I think just goes back into the whole sugar and carb addiction that a lot of people, myself included, I used to have, and so many people have this right now. So the whole reasoning behind the carnivore diet is, of course, Anthony Chaffee has put it very succinctly that plants are trying to kill you. This has to do with the defense mechanism that plants use to deter predators, to deter being eaten. It's well documented that plants put toxins in their tissue to deter and even try to poison predators from eating them. So you look at something like broccoli or kale or any type of leafy green, and you also look back in terms of human history. What would humans have been eating hundreds, thousands of years ago? Would they have ever wanted to pick up a leaf of kale and eat that as opposed to eating some very sweet berries that they actually could stomach, or eating mainly large herbivore type animals that they're able to kill and just get tons of calories from protein and fat off of one animal? It obviously would be the large animal. And so this is where a lot of the carnivore thinking comes from, is that for the majority of human history, humans have likely eaten a diet very high in animal fat, saturated fat, very high in protein, but very low in carbohydrates and very low in plants. Because not only are plants trying to kill you, but they're just also not that calorically dense. There's not that many calories in kale, if anything. I don't really know if kale has that much to offer in terms of total sustenance, trying to live off something like kale. So the whole recent fad of wanting to eat tons and tons of salad, tons and tons of leafy greens is very new in human history. Even 100 years ago, it'd probably be hard to find a doctor, dietitian really recommending eating the huge quantities of kale and other leafy greens that doctors are recommending now. So that's maybe a very brief snippet in terms of the entire thinking behind why you would do something like a carnivore diet. I will say it is pretty difficult to start and stick with. I've known a few people since I started who I was able to convince to try it as well. So far, none of them have stuck with it long term, unfortunately, because I've really noticed a ton of benefits in my assessment. It's really worth sticking with. I don't see myself going back in any way, and if anything, I see myself continuing to almost improve, the optimal diet for myself. What does that really look like? What kinds of meats, what cuts of meats do I really perform best on? At this point in the diet, I'm almost reassessing fruit entirely. Like, should I try to cut out fruit entirely, go completely onto just fat itself, not really consuming any carbohydrates at all? So a lot of the upcoming months will determine that for myself. But really, what I wanted to talk about today is looking forward in coming years and also looking back. A few years ago, very few people had heard about the carnivore diet. I maybe heard about it first 2 years ago, and at the time I thought it was pretty fringe. Why would anybody do that kind of a mentality? Now, looking forward, what I see the potential of the carnivore diet to do is pretty remarkable. Now, the state of health in the Western world is very bleak right now. There's estimates out there that some 90% of US adults are either pre diabetic or pre metabolically diseased or have some sort of metabolic disease already. 90%. So that's only 10% of US adults who are actually healthy and not at risk of developing some metabolic disease. And a metabolic disease would be anything involving your metabolism. So think of it as like obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, these huge umbrellas of disease that tend to just be so common right now. 70% of US adults are also overweight or obese. So again, only 30% are within their, what would be considered a healthy weight or BMI range. So bottom line, the overall health of the Western world, specifically the US, is very poor right now. Now, the carnivore diet has immense potential for something like this to be extremely transformative. There's so many other examples out there on YouTube, online, of people who just got to the end of listening to conventional advice, of trying to limit total caloric intake, a diet where they're still eating carbs and still tempted to binge on carbs. It's so hard to lose weight on a diet like that. I thankfully have never had to deal with being overweight, but once you get to be overweight or obese, it's very difficult if you've been binge eating, susceptible to binge eating carbs, which I would guess most overweight or obese people have been susceptible to. It's so hard to limit your caloric intake and lose weight doing that. Your body is just driving you to consume calories until you satiate your hunger. If you're doing that with sugar and carbs, it's going to be extremely difficult to lose weight. Even on a diet where you say go, paleo diet or keto or vegan or something like that, where you cut out a lot of the processed food, yes, that's a step in the right direction, but you're still eating a lot of sugar and carbs. So actually fixing your underlying metabolic disease, whatever it is, it's going to be very difficult on a diet other than carnivore. In my opinion, that's kind of the really the only diet-related solution to a lot of these metabolic diseases that we're seeing right now. So what I see is a lot of potential out there for the carnivore diet to help people. I think a lot of this will depend on how soon does the carnivore diet reach a tipping point where so many people have heard about it, they've known people who've tried it and found it very helpful, they maybe even seen it in a close friend or relative be very helpful, and so they themselves start trying it, and you see the social trend start to snowball from there. This would have massive ramifications for the overall economy of the United States, around the world. Obviously health would improve dramatically. You would actually begin to see life expectancy go back up. You'd see quality of life go back up too. People would not just be wasting away suffering in their homes anymore. You'd actually see quality of life go up dramatically. Not only physical, but mental health as well. Carnivore diet's been shown to be so helpful with mentally related illnesses. So there's so much potential to improve people's health. The thing about the U.S. economy is so much of the U.S. economy is based on treating illnesses right now. So this would be very transformative. It would create a lot of new business opportunities, maybe in the agriculture industry, going back to raising more animals, because meat consumption would go way up. Obviously, you'd see a shift away from processed food, so a lot of these megalithic food-based soft drink and food packaging companies would probably shrink very dramatically, if not go out of business entirely, which I would not mind at all. But this does have a big effect on the US economy, because so much of our GDP gets spent, literally trillions gets spent each year on managing illness and watching people still get more sick. It does not improve overall health whatsoever. So I guess this does present a lot of opportunities coming up in the carnivore diet space, in the overall dietary space as well. It hopefully does spill into mainstream medicine as well, when doctors finally realize, hey, we have to get behind this actual evidence towards the carnivore diet. We have to shift our stance on cholesterol and saturated fat and all the nonsense type of dietary advice that's been going around for literally the last 70 years, ever since the FDA and everybody decided to demonize saturated fat and paint sugar and carbs as this sort of crystal clean calorie source, which has had the exact opposite effect of what they would say, of course. So all this being said, I just really wanted to make this video to outline my story on the carnivore diet. It is not a huge transformation like what some people describe. I would say it's been really helpful for myself, just in all of the kind of minute ways in which my health just was not optimal. You can always optimize your health more. Even at this point, I'm starting to take a look at, okay, if I eliminate fruit, if I go completely into ketogenesis, just burning fat, saturated fat from animal-related products, that probably could even improve my overall health even a little bit more. So there's always incremental steps one can take. But I just really wanted to make this video to, just document my experience on the carnivore diet, and really hopefully encourage some of you watching this who might be thinking of the carnivore diet. You need to give it a try. I gave it a try, I gave it a month, and then I stuck with it, because even in 1 or 2 weeks, you really do start to notice a huge difference in my experience. It might take a little longer for you, depending on what issues you're hoping to resolve with it, but even in just a few days after all the plant junk had gotten out of my body, I started noticing massive improvements in energy, in sleep, overall mood throughout the day. I can be kind of a moody person now and then, a pun maybe intended, but all that being said, I'd like to hear what you have to say about this in the comment section below. I hope to see all of you again at some point.